All right, looks like we have probably a quorum now. As it's been a while since we've all gotten together, so wanted to thank you all again for coming together for the South Carolina Labor Force Participation Task Force. Our main goal for this meeting is to review with Jennifer Miller and Ron Landis the results of the first part of our research, which was a survey of the recently unemployed. And so before we do that, I just want to go ahead and introduce you to one of our team members. She's been at some of the other meetings, but you may not have seen her in action. Michelle Pazensky, who was our Assistant Executive Director of Workforce Development, has moved on to a job with Department of Labor, and her replacement and our guest over here, I'm not sure on which side of the screen, is Nina Staggers. Nina, do you want to go ahead and just do a quick introduction?
Sure. Good afternoon. My name is Nina Staggers, and I'm the Assistant Executive Director for Workforce Development. Look forward to working with you all with this task force. Thank you.
So really the main focus of today is going to be on the presentation of the results, and then at the end kind of talking through any feedback that you all have on that portion, and then also discussing our kind of wrapping up of phase one of the task force. We do have one more meeting that we will probably need to have to review the results of part two of the research that Chimera Economics has presented for us. And you should have all received an email with that draft to review as well. So I think unless there are any questions or any initial discussion, I think I will turn it over to Ron from Millan Chicago, who can give us a briefing on the results from the survey. Ron, are you with us?
Hey, how are you? Nice to meet everybody. Erica, I wanted to ask, so I want to be respectful of your time and what you want to accomplish today. We have a slide deck that's about the same length that we presented to the executive director a while back, so it might be 20, 25 minutes-ish or so going straight through. Is that?
That sounds great.
And has everybody read the report? Has everybody gotten a copy of the report? Okay, cool. All right. So if there's things, I guess the other thing too is I know this is a little bit hard. I still prefer things face to face, but if there are questions as we're going along, I'd prefer to just take them as they come up, as opposed to waiting to the end. But if folks want to wait to the end, that's fine too. So whatever we want to do. If you ask a question and I'm not seeing it or something, I apologize. I'm going to try to keep my eye on the chat as we're going. So with that said, let me go ahead and share my screen here. So is everyone seeing a copy of the slides?
Yes.
Let me see if I can, what do I need to do? Let me try this one more time. This one, right? There we go. Okay. Better? Is that okay? No?
Yes.
Okay. So just again, sort of, I guess, quick overview of what this deck has in it. Just sort of an overview of what we did, what the task was, sort of the characteristics of the problem and sort of survey itself, and then we'll get right into the results. So what were the, what did we get in terms of numbers? And we really focused on three pieces here, right? We were focused on what are folks currently doing? And for those folks that aren't working, what barriers do they perceive in getting to work? And also, are there sort of facilitators that might get them back to work? And then sort of woven in with that is we'll try to draw some inferences and interpretations as we go. And I'm telling you all this, but you already know this, but just to make sure we're all on the same page. Right, the focus here was on individuals who had filed a claim in 2020. And trying to understand what they're doing now. Where are they? Are they working? If they're not working, what are they doing? And again, if they're not, what are some of the things that are preventing them from working and might get them to come back? So the survey overall, again, you've seen a copy of the report, you've seen the survey, but we're really focused on, again, current work status, various pieces of information regarding sort of demographic characteristics, some work experience questions. And then really the heart of it for those that weren't working, again, barriers, perceptions and attitudes folks had towards the labor market, and then again, what they thought might be possible drivers of re-engagement or re-employment. And so the folks that we were targeting here, these were folks that were present in wage data in 2019, filed a UI claim in 2020, and then were not present in the 2021 wage data. So after doing some cleaning, folks that, because we were doing this through purely electronic means, folks for whom we didn't have email contacts, folks that had ages that were sort of odd, like 1 year old or, 150 years old or things like that. We did some cleaning. I think the original data set had about 170,000 people in it or so. So after taking folks out that we just either couldn't contact or we were concerned that some of the data might be contaminated a little bit, we had 150,000 folks who received the survey. 6,116 responses.
Ron, can you check? We're still seeing the first slide.
You're only seeing the first slide?
Yeah, and we're seeing the full outline of all of them on the left.
Oh, that's weird. That's really weird. What do you see now?
Same. The South Carolina Department of Employment and Workforce. Yeah.
All right, let me try this one more time. That's really weird. I keep getting something to update a driver to annotate, and I know I don't want to do that. So I'm wondering what if that's doing something to me here.
All right, now you're on the slide, I think. Yeah.
Now you see survey. Okay, apologies for that. Oops, apologies for that. So yeah, so we sent this to 150,000 folks. 6,116 responded, which corresponds to a response rate of roughly 4%. And it took folks about 4 minutes to complete it. There were a handful of folks who accessed the link, but the very first question was, do you consent to sort of take the survey and participate and have your data used? And a handful of those folks said no. So we had just under 6,100 who actually provided consent and for whom we collected data. Just very big overview of the sample versus the population. Sample on the right, population on the left, right? We have a higher proportion of females in the sample than we had in the population, slightly higher proportion of white respondents, slightly lower proportion of Black African-American respondents. The respondents were slightly on the older side, so we had fewer in the younger category. And in terms of ethnicity, we were pretty much in line with the population. So in terms of the demographics, in that respect, that's where the sample stood. When we looked across the state, so if we looked across the workforce development areas as our sort of foundation, you can see that for the most part, we were in line with, the sample was in line with the population in terms of representation across the state. So we felt like we weren't oversampling or undersampling in any one particular area, so we felt pretty good about who we actually got to respond to the survey. Just one slide here of definitions, and then we'll sort of get into some of what we saw. The status on the right, those were actual work statuses that we either asked people, we gave them as options, or they told us. So for example, deceased was not an option, obviously, that we gave people, but we did have 2 or 3 people who obviously somebody filled it out for them and they were deceased. So everything on the right, those were actual responses we got from folks. And then the categories on the left were sort of working categories, pardon the phrase, to help us sort of categorize those a little bit more specifically. So anyone who was working in any capacity, was self-employed or was active military, went into this category we called working. The not working available, these were folks who said they weren't working and they either said they were available to work or that they were not looking. Essentially, these were folks that were not working but didn't have a reason why. Right, as opposed to the other 2 categories here, folks told us they were not working, they either were retired or student, and or they were not working because of health and or disability issues. And then, as I mentioned, there were a few others sprinkled in there. So it's those 5 on the left that we really use to break it down to try to make it a little more manageable. And so if we look overall, we can see that just slightly less than half of our respondents reported actually working, right? They were in one of those 5 categories we talked about. So 46% were working, not quite 30% were not working, but available, right? Another 18% in that retired not working but were retired and or students. So again, slightly less than half of those folks that we surveyed actually reported working in some way. Now moving into sort of breaking that down a little bit more and saying, are the patterns that we see there the same across demographic groups? The way these slides are set up is there's just an overall summary initially of the results and then the actual results. So in terms of gender, we had a higher percentage of females who are not working in the available category or not working due to health or disability concerns, and a higher percentage of males who are not working but were in the retired student category. And this is what that breakdown looked like. Overall, not terribly different, but when I say that there's a difference there, it is a statistically significant difference. So I only use the term different if it's statistically significant. If we look at race, and I should have pointed out on an earlier slide, we had so few respondents in categories other than white or Black, African American that those are not reported here, just to try to keep it simple and efficient. But we did have folks from other races respond. It's just that the numbers were pretty small. In terms of race, we had a higher percentage of Black and African American respondents who reported not working but available, and a higher percentage of white respondents who are not working due to health or disability issues. And we can see those results here. So in terms of working status, those were the same, but it's in the not working area that we see the differences, right? A significantly higher proportion in the Black African American group that are not working but available. In terms of age, we broke that into 3 categories. So these were folks that are 24 and younger. 25 to 54 is the second group, and then 55 and older is the third group. Higher percentage in those 2 youngest categories were working compared to those 55 years and older. Higher percentage in that mid-range group who are not working but available. So in that 25 to 54-year-old compared to the upper and lower groups. And then there's a type of a higher percentage of white. That's obviously from the previous slide. But here's what those results look like. Probably not terribly surprising, but a much lower percentage of folks in the more than 55 category working, and a much higher proportion of those in the not working and that retired student. And obviously here, the lion's share of those folks are retired, right? They're not that way because of the way that we group that, just to be clear. On the educational attainment side, we broke it because we had 9 different levels of educational attainment. We just split it. So folks with a college degree or higher versus those without a college degree or lower. So a higher percentage of individuals with a college degree and beyond were working and not working retired. A higher percentage of individuals with less than a college degree were not working and available, or not working due to health or disability issues. And see that here, right? So higher proportions in that working and not working retired on the right side, so college degree or more. And so that the yellow box, the sort of yellow chunk of the graph, those are the not working availables. And you can see a much higher proportion for folks that have less than a college degree. We did ask about previous jobs. And the way we did that was an open-ended question because we weren't quite sure how best to capture that. I don't think a lot of people know what SOC codes even are. So if we use those, we probably would have a difficult time getting reliable data. So we asked them in an open-ended way, and then we coded those, classified those using the SOC codes. But we also added, because we have a lot of folks that indicated they were sort of self-employed, business owner, independent contractor, we pulled that out as a group as well and added that sort of in with the SOC codes. So if we look at that, we can see that the folks that are in business owner, community and social services, and personal care and services report working at a significantly greater rate, higher percentage than all other occupations, right? So if you look at all other occupations as a whole, these 3 groups are working at a higher rate, right, at a higher percentage. And production is working at a significantly lower percentage, right? Not working overall, not due to any one of those reasons, but just not working in general.
Can I interrupt?
Of course.
So here, I guess you asked them, and the target of the survey was kind of to try to find these people who weren't back at work, but almost half of the people were back at work.
Mhm.
And so I guess if you're thinking about the group of people who are back at work, are there answers to this survey about their current job then, if they're working? And then do you separate that out somehow? Because it just reading the survey, it looks like if you were currently working, you would answer that as whatever your current job is.
Because they were never asked, if they were asked about current status, they were actually never asked about current job. There it was just, are you working, yes or no? So our inference would be
but then I mean, I guess how it's phrased, if I'm looking here on work experience, it says, please tell us about your most recent job, which if they're currently employed, I guess they might be interpreting that as their current.
And that's what I was going to say. I assume because we didn't ask them that earlier on, that when they're responding to the current job that they have. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, I guess one thing that would, be potentially interesting, I guess, is to understand for those who are currently, I mean, to break that out separately. Maybe that's what you're doing in the results already, is only looking at the people who are currently unemployed. But I guess, for the people who are currently employed, it might be useful to think about those questions in terms of when they got back to work, or somehow flagging that separately to understand that population who's in the initial data frame, but then had somehow found a job that was not detected. Like, did they recently find one, or using? I would think we would want to use that data slightly differently, depending if they were employed or unemployed.
And I'm going to jump in here and just let you know. So Ron and Jennifer has given all of the raw data to do. So we do have the ability to go back and look at certain questions if we have not covered those in these slides or in the final report. So one of the things we've been looking at is breaking it down more regionally than we had in the final report. But that's definitely a question that we can go back and look at with the data that we have.
Yeah. So, but then just to be clear, the results here, you haven't separated out the people who are working versus non-working in this previous job questions. It's just summary statistics for the whole, anyone who reported on those jobs.
So these folks are, we're breaking it down just working or anything else, right? So if they said they were working in any capacity, folks in these three areas are reporting that they're doing so more so than any other 20 plus occupations.
Okay.
And the not working, anyone who reported not work, I mean, we did split it in that very gross way. And if you just look at the folks that aren't working, the folks that indicated their previous job was in production, they're not working at a significantly greater rate than any of the other 20 other codes. Does that help?
I think so.
Okay. Yeah, so the initial cut here is just to say, if we just break it into two groups, working now versus not, do we see a difference in terms of what people are doing? And again, we don't know for sure that what they're responding to is the current job. That's our inference. So our first question was, can we sort of make anything out of that? And obviously we can three here, right? Three groups and one and another. What we then did though is we took, okay, everybody who's not working, what if we segment that out and we break it into that they're not working and they could work, or they're not working retired, they're not working health disability. So we sort of segment that out a little bit too, right? So we kind of, in a hierarchical tree, we first split it working, not working, and then we say, okay, within not working, how about if we compare folks who are available versus anything else? And so, for example, in the percent not working other, so people that are retired, student, not working due to health or disability concerns, people in the areas of arts and design, educational instruction, healthcare, and installation are in those groups at a much higher clip than any of the others. And this is only people that aren't working. If we look at it the other direction, people that aren't working but available, the folks in building and grounds cleaning, business owner, food prep, transportation, there's the percentage there for not working but available is higher than it is for all of the other SOC codes. So it's, I don't know if that's kind of where your question was going, but we did break it, first of all, working, not working, and then within not working, this sort of simplistic cut.
But I do think it's interesting to ask that question, right?
Yeah.
For folks who are working, let's just assume, they read it, I'm going to put my current job right now. And one thing that you might be going after, at least in this conversation, is, okay, is that job actually the same that they were working in? And can we get a proxy for that? And what you could do is you could go back to education to see, is there some alignment there with their current job and with their educational attainment? If it's there, sort of get a proxy to see, like, is that the same field or a different field? And I don't know if that speaks or gives you more insights into what you're asking. But yeah, we don't have that information as to, okay, even though you're now working, what's your current job and what was your previous job before your current job, which is what I think you're ultimately trying to get at, right? To see if they're the same or different potentially.
Yeah, I mean, I guess part of it is like, if we were just interested in these people who are not back in work, we might want to know, well, some of them are actually back in work by the time we catch them in the survey. And so is it like to somehow miss them for the year of 2021? And I guess there you have some of this. I guess the second question is, how long were you in that job? So I guess that could be a check on, was this a job that was found since the survey frame was designed, or is it just some, people have like an odd job that they're reporting as a job, so that's like some self-employment as a substitute for unemployment that didn't get picked up in the official labor force statistics, some other stuff like that. But yeah, no, I think that's helpful. Thanks.
Yeah. And I should have said too at the beginning, I think when we started, we really wanted to capture as much as we could from these folks, but also balancing the idea that they didn't owe us anything and trying to keep it short. And I think some of the things that we probably would love to have asked, I think our concern was if the survey starts to get long. So I should have said that at the beginning, that there was a focus here on efficiency of data collection too. And I think, as with most surveys, it's never perfect. But I think that's a great point, that it would be nice to know exactly where were you, where are you, right? And really be able to track that. Yeah. Okay. Get back here. And then the last piece I'll look at here by way of demographics, just by way of summary here. If we look at the economic tiers, so tier 1 through tier 4, we do see some differences here as well. So there's a higher percentage of folks in tier 1 who are working in comparison to tiers 3 and 4. There's a higher percentage of respondents in tier 4 who are not working but available compared to all the other tiers. There's a higher percentage of folks in tier 3 who are not working retired compared to 1 and 4. So when we look at the next slide, that's the nature of the significant differences here. But it's that, if we look at that bottom bar, right, it's that 37% in tier 4 that is significantly higher than any of the other groups. So there's a big chunk of folks in the tier 4 economic zone. Am I saying that right? Zone or area?
Yeah. Ron, I was going to interrupt you. We have several people who are from South Carolina and are probably familiar with the tiers, but there may be some individuals who are not familiar. These are tiers based on, kind of economically advantaged versus disadvantaged, looking at unemployment rates and per capita income, I think. And so tier 1 are your kind of more urban, higher income counties, and then tier 4 are more of your rural or kind of historically economically disadvantaged categories. So just for those of you who may not be familiar with that, each of our counties is categorized in terms of tiers for job tax credit purposes.
Thanks, Erica. Yeah, so it's not, and so if we look at this now, the comparison between tier 1 and tier 4, right, the dark blue areas, those are significantly different, and the light and the yellow areas are significantly different in the other direction. So again, the nature of these, anytime I say significant, or anytime I say difference, it is statistically significant. So that's sort of overall what we saw by way of sort of description, where people are and what they're doing, and then how that looks across. And I think the overall summary is obviously the pattern of working and different types of not working is not uniform, right, across different types of subgroups, whether that's gender, race, age, previous job, or tier. There are some differences in here, so it's not a uniform distribution or set of responses. Okay, so now we had folks who are not working but said they were available or potentially available to work. We gave them a list of 29 potential barriers and asked them to tell us how many of those, if any of those, they saw as important to them or reasons why they're not working. And so this was a closed-ended question. And if we look at the top 10, these are the top 10. So 23% of respondents said low-paying jobs, 20% of respondents said health, so on and so forth. So we can look down there, and that's just, if we look overall, don't take into account any of the sort of demographic cuts to the data, this is what we see. So low-paying jobs at the top, criminal record at the bottom of this top 10. And once again, we can do the same thing and sort of look and say, is this uniform across the various subgroups? And hopefully these tables there's not too much on these tables and they're not too confusing, but so for gender here, we see females on the left, the top 10 reasons, and males on the right. We can see here that there are some differences. Right, females reporting lack of childcare and stay with child in their top 10. Those do not appear in the top 10 for men. Criminal record and lack of information about jobs appear in the top 10 for men, but not for women. But the other 8 are in concert with one another. They're both in the top 10. The rank ordering is a little bit different, but I will point out that low-paying jobs is the top one.
What is the difference between stay with child and lack of childcare?
So some lack of childcare was more of I want to go back to work, but I can't get childcare. Stay with child is I really want to stay home with my children. So those could be collapsed potentially, but that's the subtle difference there.
Did you break out low-paid jobs by education status?
Do we break out whether the responses there varied across?
Yeah, I mean, I could understand if somebody with a college degree was like, well, I can't find a job that's paying enough, but for a low-paying job, if you didn't have a college degree, it would almost, isn't that kind of what those jobs are for?
I don't think we actually did break that by that gross grouping of greater or less than college degree. That's a really good point, though. Yeah. I mean, the one thing we see is no matter how we cut it, that low-paying jobs always comes up as the top one. But to your point, it could be disproportional for some that we just didn't see.
And so these are people saying, I'm not working, and I'm not working because
they're either
low-paying jobs. So they're getting no paying jobs, but they're not working because of low paying.
Yeah, they're saying I'm not working and I want to work. They're either saying that, or they're saying I'm not working and they're not telling us something like I'm retired, I have a disability issue, I have a health issue. So they either explicitly say they're ready to go to work, or they're just saying I'm not working and they didn't say anything. Okay. So the inference is they potentially could work. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
You bet. You bet. For race, the top 10, again, low-paying jobs comes out at the top for the Black African American group. For the white group, health actually comes out at a little bit higher. So these are folks that are saying they have some health, there are some health issues, but they didn't tell us that that's why they weren't looking for a job initially. So it's unclear what some of those things are. When we say health there, some of it is COVID. Some of it is temporary. It's not long-term health, whereas the disability and health, when they were telling us that, would tended to be longer term, that they're just out of the workforce. On the white side, you can see that age, the perception that people are too old, and or low self-esteem show up in the top 10. For the Black African American group, lack of training, criminal records show up in their top 10, but again, 8 out of the 10 are in common. For age, again, there's a lot of overlap here. Not surprisingly, the 55-year and older group think that they're too old. The perception is that the barrier is that people think they're too old. Also, a lack of computer skills and also a lack of information about jobs show up for that group. for the 25 to 54 and the 24 years and younger, they're pretty much identical to one another, except that the 25 to 54 do list potential health issues, and then 24 years and younger list family problems as reasons why they're having a hard time getting back to work. But again, when we look at these, we tend to see a fair amount of overlap, but for each one, there are some unique ones at the top. And these are just the top 10 as well. Right? If you look across every subcategory that we looked at, these 5 always show up. Low-paying jobs, gaps in employment history, some sense that the hours that they want to work are not available to them, that they have a lack of transportation in some way to get to a job, and or some disability issues.
So these were additive. They weren't, they couldn't choose multiple answers, correct?
Right.
Okay,
right.
so you couldn't choose low-paying job, and I couldn't find childcare available.
Yep. Anything
Okay, that's something I think a lot of people would be looking at. Okay.
Yep. Anything that, and we did, just parenthetically, we did have one person who selected all 29, but that was one person. Now, the other piece of it then we said was, what are the things that would get you back to work? So we asked the question in a slightly different way a little later in the survey. And this is what we see coming up. These top 4 are clearly the dominant things. Better paying jobs, more flexible working conditions, a location close to home, and then flexible hours. So conditions, a little bit different would be things like telework, right? Working from home, hybrid kind of stuff. Whereas flexible hours are literally, I can't work from 8 to 5. I need something where I could work, 5 hours a day or 12 hours a day, one day, that kind of thing. So you can see that those 4 are, again, this is overall. Those are, and these 2, people could choose more than one, obviously, right? So 51% of the respondents said high paying job.
So I guess this goes back to the other one because it just popped back into my head. You have those tier statuses. So I'd love to see high paying job by tier status.
There's tier status.
Bingo. There we go. Thank you. I was just trying to do a segue for you.
I was going to say I'll send the check for the setup and we're done. No, yeah. So you can
no
see
difference. That's
incredible. There are some differences, right? If you look at tier 1, flexible work and high paying job come out at the top. If you look at tier 4, location close to home seems to be dominant. So it's not, again, like the other aspects of this. What we see is there's a lot of similarity here, depending on how we cut it, whether it's race or gender or whatever it might be, to economic area. But there are some differences too, so it's not uniform across. And so yeah, the difference here primarily is that location close to home for that 4th group, or for the tier 4 group. And so if we put that all together, right, what we just said, about half the folks that were in that group that responded to the survey said they were working in some way. About 30% were not, but available to work. The status profiles do differ. Again, like I just said, there's a lot of consistency, but there are some, I think, some important differences in there. It's not, I don't think it's a single solution to address this. And then for the individuals who are not working, what are the barriers and what did they see as factors that might encourage them to come back? I think what we saw there in those 5 barriers, there were job-related factors, right? Like the low-paying issue, but there were also some individual characteristics as well. And then in terms of what we just saw, those 4 factors, higher pay, location, and then various flexibility with respect to work, all of those came out clearly as the dominant ones. And I think that's what I got.
Did you look at all about the within South Carolina? And then I guess these responses are all for people who are still in South Carolina. Mm-hmm. Was there anything to be gained from kind of looking at the people who left or moved?
So we did initially look at the folks that, and I think, is that on the first part of the survey? I think we didn't do all of the more fine-grained analyses on those folks, But if you look in the report, page 9, there is a brief breakdown of the differences. And I think a little later on too, I can't remember if we put it in the final report or not. There's greater proportion of folks outside of South Carolina who are working. Right. And so the inference is, I don't know if we can draw the inference that the folks who are outside of South Carolina wanted to work and couldn't find work in South Carolina, so moved. Or moved, and then they subsequently, we obviously can't say anything about that, but I thought in one of the appendices is broken out by the we have non-South Carolina folks.
Okay.
It might be appendix.
I don't know if we.
I didn't get carefully through all the appendices.
Appendix D, yeah.
Yeah, so it starts on page 56 for those
Thanks.
non-residents again.
But it is different. It is, the characteristics are most definitely different in terms, because it's, I shouldn't say that. It's 53% working, but that not working available seems to be much smaller. But whether that's, again, did they want to work and couldn't find something and move, or did they move and then find work? That we didn't say. And because we really weren't focused on those individuals too, we didn't include that.
Any other questions for Ron or Jennifer about the presentation? I know that y'all made a slide just for me that you did not include in this PowerPoint, because I have been obsessed with, if you're not working, how are you paying your bills? So I need to go back and find the slide that you created just for me. But it seemed like it was mostly a combination of family members or a spouse working, or something like that. It was not a lot of government support or anything like that.
Yeah, I may actually,
right
I was gonna say, I may actually have that here if I could, let me see, I think I may have that for you.
Yeah, 'cause I have.
What's, oh,
It was in this separate.
Oh, it was in a
slide deck.
separate
Yeah, it was
slide. Oh, okay,
specifically
yeah.
for Erica.
Yeah, yeah.
I have a slide on that if you want to see it.
Oh, that'd be good.
Now it's unfortunately it's not just for South Carolina. I can get that because that's produced, but I'll just show you what it is national. I will show you. I can tell you that it really isn't very different when we look at a state level. Let me just find it. It is right here. Okay, let me just. First off, I got to find the meeting. Sorry. All right. Let me see here. All right. Hold on. There we are. All right. So this is as of, recently. So 23% are saying they're paying their bills with credit cards, 23% draining their savings account, 13% are borrowing from their friends, 6% are still using their stimulus payments, and that's as of August. So I haven't updated it since August. Only 1.8% saying unemployment. But the significant ones, of course, credit card debt is back up to a record level now, just had its highest recorded increase. And then we're still dealing with this excess household savings from the stimulus payments. So we spent nationally, we had about 2.5 trillion. We're down to about 1.3 trillion. We are working our way still through that. I don't think you'll ever see that number come all the way down, because I don't believe everybody's going to spend that money. I think a lot of people are going to save that for the long haul. So just wanted to update you on that.
Thank you.
And where's that data coming from? The percentages, like where are you surveying?
It's a spot survey by the Census Bureau.
Okay, so it's still from the census. Okay.
Ron, could you put up that slide that had like where people were getting that percentage breakdown of where they were, how they were sort of making ends meet?
Yep. It's very popular when I speak. Everybody loves this slide. So here. Yeah, apologies for it's so tiny. I mean, whoops.
Oh, no,
Every time I try to roll this thing up, I end up rolling the whole thing up.
So is that in the census pulse survey?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
And they have it by state, so you can look at it by state. It has really been fairly similar. It takes, I really don't think a lot of things are going to be that different. I think sometimes if you have a smaller population like a Vermont or something, you're going to get some different numbers, but for the most part, everybody kind of breaks out fairly similar.
So now in this, it was only people that reported that they didn't have a job responding. So like that, like it might not be perfectly comparable, but what we had 31% who said their partner relying on a partner or spouse income to replace their lost income.
Sure.
About 28% said support from other family members. 24% said odd jobs. 21% was savings. 12% welfare, 8% from friends or community, and then 14% was a hodgepodge variety of different things. And we have plenty of folks who said it's none of your business.
Yeah, and you know what? So does the Pulse survey.
Mm.
You know, and I think what's so frustrating is when you see there's two things that they can answer, and one of them is that one. There's another one. I can't remember which one that is, but you get a lot of these none of your business. And you're like, I really wish you would make it some, like, how can we come up with a wording you will let us see some of our business? Because then it ends up being one of the largest buckets is this kind of unknown. So typically what they find on surveys like that is typically that distributes fairly well into the other buckets, but there is still a great question as to, you know, are people too embarrassed to say that, you know, I'm using this category versus that category? It's just hard to know because they won't tell you.
I have a question for the group, and this is just my ignorance on the topic. It's kind of jumping back, but I was very disheartened to see how many people had responded to why they weren't working because they're waiting on a decision from Social Security Disability. Is there any data on like what types of things people are experiencing that are getting them onto disability? Because I'm just like, why are all these people becoming disabled all of a sudden? Is it long COVID? Is it, you know, workplace accidents where they've, you know, not done something right at their job, or like what is there data available for that?
So there's one of the things we have to be a little careful of. When a study I just saw on this was there's a lot of stress related claims going in versus physical, because I mean the percentage of people doing physical work has dropped pretty dramatically, but the increase in claims related to stress, depression, anxiety types of things is the one that that's the bucket that has increased the most. I'm sorry, I don't have that study like in front of me. I have that somewhere. One of the things we have to also be careful at is addiction can be classified as a health disorder. So, you know, the overall number for the country is like 7 million people are out battling addiction. So sometimes those people will show up in the it's none of your business. Sometimes they'll say it as a health disorder. So it just depends how we capture that, but that is a big part of this as well, especially for primate men.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. There is data on that, or there are data on that, Erica, on the reasons why people get disability, but there's a significant lag, as you can imagine. But I haven't looked at it really recently, but I've looked at it some point in time over the last 2 years. And to Ron's point, if you look at the reasons, the health conditions that people have that classify them disabled, certainly the ones around mental health have increased over time. And then there's other ones too, like joint problems has increased. Well, that's likely to do with obesity, right? So some of them are things that they're kind of primary health conditions, and some of them are secondary, right? Like maybe it's mental health that they're getting disability for, but that's related to something about their drug addiction, right? So it's sometimes primary, sometimes secondary. So I think it's hard to really know.
I mean, the sample frame of the survey is going to pick up more disability, just the way that you're basically trying to survey long-term unemployed. And so once you're filtering that way, the disability numbers are going to be surprisingly high if you're just comparing that to the population as a whole too. It's just something to keep in mind.
Just so I clarified a point close to actually what he was just saying. When somebody said they weren't working because too old, was that too old as their own perception of themselves, or too old that somebody was like there was ageism out there? Because I almost felt like that were people, not to, the one problem with surveys is the older population, sometimes they have nothing better to do, they'll do surveys. And it's like, they'll be like, yeah, I'm not working because I'm too old. And it's like, yeah, okay, great. I was kind of trying to figure out if you were going to go back, and if like, look, if you're retired, that's cool. Like that's not really a problem. So, and 43% of the 100 million people who are out of the labor force are out because they say they're retired. So, I mean, that's a significant number of people you would expect to say, well, I'm too old. And like, well, that's not a problem. But I was just curious if there was just the way the question was asked.
Yeah, there are. I mean, there are certainly folks who said, I'm just too old, I'm not working. But that's not that one was the perception is ageism. Like, I'm not getting a job because I'm too old. Not that I don't want to work, but because somebody doesn't want to hire me because I'm too old. Which is why you see that in that upper group, but you don't see it in the lower groups. Obviously don't. A 20-year-old doesn't have the perception that they're too old for a job.
Well, now I'm fascinated by the too low paying job, if that's related to age. There's a reason why I say that is I'm supposed to write something on this, but over a course of a career, of course, you go through, many changes and promotions and everything, and then someday you lose your job. Well, now your salary is way out of line with what the actual market rate is for that job. So your perception is that, well, I can't find a high enough paying job, but your experience is kind of hiding the fact that the experience isn't what's valued in the job, just the job itself. And the value of that job has this price. And you're like, well, I need to make way more than that. And it's like, well, there's a disconnect versus where your pay ended up and what the actual value of that job is. So it's just something I always like to check when people say I can't find a high enough paying job. Is that just the result of an age, accumulation? Basically, you get enough COLAs, you get enough, yearly grade increases, you'll get a wage that can get really out of line with where the market's at.
Yeah.
So my presumption, and I guess I wasn't assuming this, was that many people were looking and saying it's too low paying for the cost that it would take me to go back. So if I have to pay $15 an hour for childcare, but I can only qualify for a $9 an hour job in my local area, that was kind of the perception that I was taking from the too low paying, because that was a concern. We talked to a group of HR committee people, and I was like, I don't think this is everybody saying, oh, it's too low, I want $100,000 a year job. I think there's maybe some people that are in there that say that, and that may be correlated with the age question, but I have a feeling it has more to do with the cost of childcare, or I would guess that would be.
But there, you have that page. I'll just share it. It's your own. Hold on. It was your own thing that you put up. Now, if I can just find it here, it is. Oh, for goodness sakes. Sorry, this is what happens when you have 30,000 things open. Okay, this was your own slide, which I screenshot it. So if you could choose multiple ones, and you said high paying job, but there was also a care for others. Interesting that one shows up at 51%, one shows up at 2%. Am I misreading this?
Nope, you got it. That's right. People could have said, now, some of these were provided to them, some of them are write-in candidates, so to speak.
Okay.
Right. So there's a difference there. But yeah, they certainly could have.
Yeah, there's a barrier to entry that one of the things we keep exploring, or if you're on welfare, if you're on, like I might have a disabled son, and we in the disabled community. So there's a lot of people who are in that, what we call almost this binary horrible cutoff, where you're like, you're receiving, I think it's Medicaid, I believe. And then if you make over a certain amount of dollars, they completely cut off your medical assistance. So if you have a child who has a disability, you can only make so much. And then they're like, you'd be better off not working. So there's that aspect of somebody saying, look, it's not a high enough paying job for me to make a cosmic leap from having the state providing a lot of medical care for whether it be a parent or a child, and me being able to cover those costs in addition to, the costs I need to take care of my family. It's just an issue that we continue to explore.
Any other questions about the survey itself and the results from that? I think we're going to have a chance to talk more in depth about what next steps look like for the task force, whether that includes you or doesn't include you, because I think that the end of all of this, what we hoped to come out of it was some information that we can share with others. And we've already gotten quite a number of questions from different local areas saying, is this something that you can break down these numbers for my area? And or a lot of them we can, not necessarily a specific county. The sample sizes are probably not that large, but definitely for the regions that that Ron showed on one of the slides. So we're excited about being able to offer some just additional information to different areas that may be interested in this. A lot of it's probably telling them things that they intuitively knew, but I think kind of quantifying the degree to which this is happening in their areas, especially if they're different from the rest of the state. So I know some of the rural areas know that transportation is an issue. This really shows that, yes, it definitely is, and jobs closer to home or other transportation options are going to be the best fit for helping in those areas versus the high-paying jobs or the optimal hours and things like that might be more what people are looking for in the the metro areas. The other thing, I just kind of wrapping up kind of just my thoughts, I was just kind of surprised at how small of a percentage of people were in the working available category. Like, I knew that we had a lot of retirees. I knew we had people that had disability or health issues, but 28% of the people that we thought were on the sidelines is not that large of a group in the grand scheme of things. It's not like we have millions of people sitting on the sidelines. So I think that helps us to try to anchor to what is reasonable expectation for changing our labor force participation in South Carolina. So I want to thank Ron and Jennifer for the presentation and for the great work. And we're very excited to continue to play around with your data. It was so hard. I was just waiting for it to come in, and Brian and I are so used to just playing with it ourselves. I was like, okay, when are they going to send it? So thank you for that.
And if these slides, if you want a copy of these slides or something, just let me know.
So we do have one additional meeting that we would like to try to do sometime at the end of November or early December. I know we're starting to get into the holiday time period. So if there is anything else that y'all want to talk about in this meeting, we can, but mostly I think we're going to focus on getting the results of the next piece of the research and then figuring out what does 2023 look like for the Labor Force Participation Task Force as we move from kind of gathering information and then providing that back to the different groups who need to start thinking through possible policy recommendations. I don't know that necessarily all of you would be interested in being part of that, but obviously we would welcome anyone's continued feedback or continued presence on this group. So I'm going to make sure I have it bulldozed over my colleagues. Brian, Nina, do y'all have anything else for this
Nothing.
group?
Thank you.
Anything else from the larger group? Good. Well, thank you guys very much for all of your help, and look forward to seeing you again in about a month. Thanks.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.